everyone, and thank you so much for tuning in to ChasingCinema.com's official YouTube channel. I'm your host, Jacob Tiranno, and you're probably wondering where I've been. If you've been watching and scouting on our YouTube channel, you would have known that last week James Hsu reviewed Don't Breathe: The Mechanic Resurrection, and he'd mentioned that I was under the weather. This was true. Unfortunately, these last 2 weeks, I've been really under the weather. I've been having some medical issues. I don't want to go into detail, but no, they're not super serious or life-threatening or anything like that. But they were serious enough to kind of really take me out of the game. And it takes me a lot to kind of stop updating you guys and creating content. I was in a lot of pain, but like I said, I don't want to get into that. Just know that I'm feeling better. I'm not completely healed. This is kind of an up and down ride. Hopefully it won't last too much longer and I'll be 100% back to health shortly. But I knew I was falling behind in my 365-day movie challenge updates, so I am back to do so, get you guys up to date with week 34, which is also known as Kevin Week. So you're probably saying, what's Kevin Week? Well, I'm sure you figured out that Kevin Week is dedicated to a great friend of mine, Kevin from Ohio. He's actually more like family, and like me, he is a huge movie buff. However, he really kind of has an expertise in movies from the 80s that have a lot to do with family adventure. If you're a fan of the Goonies, you're going to love these recommendations he gave me because they are so awesome. But beyond, of course, his spectrum is much wider than that. He watches a lot of other movies than just these family 80 movies. But he also really has a great taste for finding rare movies or movies that aren't commonly on DVD shelves or around movie stores. I also want to say before we get started that there was a tragic thing that happened this week, and that was the passing of Gene Wilder. Fortunately, I was able to write a little tribute to Gene Wilder as well as talk about him on the radio. Make sure to click the white eye right up here. A bunch of links will drop down. You'll be able to see that. Make sure to check that out because I was really honored I was able to do so. So, Kevin, thank you so much for giving me 7 films to watch. I was laid up in bed all week watching each of these, and they all managed to make me smile as I was dealing with my problems. So, Kevin, thank you so much, and let's hop right in to Kevin Week. Day 231 in the first day in Kevin Week, I watched the 2006 film Keeping Up with the Steins. Now, Keeping Up with the Steins obviously is not a movie that is hard to find or rare, or a movie that comes from the 80s about family and adventure. It is a family film, though. However, Kevin recommended me so many great movies, but a lot of them were kind of tough to find. We were laughing because it took me a lot of research and a lot of hunting for some of these movies to see. This one was easily accessible, and seeing the late Gary Marshall and the late Dorothy Roberts in this movie, along with Jerry Piven, another actor that I really enjoy, made me kind of say, okay, maybe I should check this out, let me watch it. Keeping Up with the Steins isn't the most creative or hilarious movie, but it's a kind-hearted movie, right? It's a movie that has a heart, that wants to tell a story for the whole family. It has little raunchy things here and there, but overall, it's just a really pleasant movie to experience. It actually reminded me more of like a cheesy sitcom, like a Cosby Show or the Brady Bunch, where you have this really happy, kind, let's talk things out type situations. Though it's not that tame, Keeping Up with the Steins actually does have some kind of really weird, raunchy moments. But, it's a solid family movie that that talks about family values, and like I said, it reminded me of the Cosby Show, and no one dislikes the Cosby Show. The humor's there. Seeing the late Doris Roberts and Gary Marshall was also kind of touching to the heart to see them both, as they're both quite charming in this movie. Not spectacular, but not that bad. Day 232 of the 365-day movie challenge, I continued Kevin Week by watching the 1980 film Midnight Madness, and Midnight Madness was definitely one of my favorites that I watched this week. Midnight Madness was definitely a movie that I enjoyed this week, and it is quite obvious that there's a lot of heavy influence from It's a Mad World. It's light, it's fun, and it'll put a smile on your face. We also get to kind of see one of the earliest film performances, if not the earliest film performance, from Michael J. Fox. The adventure is amusing. You have a bunch of kids running around town trying to compete in this game, and they're all racing, figuring out these clues. And it is long, and though it does, at the point of the ending, kind of feel a bit long, it does really flow by. It's a really fun, campy movie that you can tell is from the, that transition from the 70s to the 80s. But you have some really fun characters, hilarious characters, from Wesley to Milo to Barf. I mean, each of them have these really great qualities about them that are funny, especially if you're in a slapstick humor. It's very slapstick. But there are, I would say, too many of them. There's a bunch of different teams in this movie, and I think there are about 2 teams over the limit. There are a lot of people to keep track of, and at the point you're just kind of like, oh, I forgot that team was even in this movie. There's good characters and then some characters that don't even say things in these different teams. And had they just cut out 2 teams and made them bigger, smaller teams by taking out the good ones and getting rid of the ones that are really flat, could have been a bit better. The only other thing I really didn't dislike about this movie is there's some pretty blatant, distasteful stereotypes. The college drunk. The college jock is a drunk and he's stupid. The fat guy is always eating food and stuffing marshmallows and Oreos in his car. There's these 2 twins that are always chasing food. It's really kind of oh, come on. I mean, this movie's fairly creative for the most part. So to take those kind of jokes, I was like, it's a bit easy. But it was also something that was kind of natural back then. Still, I enjoyed it. I was glad I discovered this movie. This was a great pick, Kevin. Okay, I hope you guys are ready for this, because I'm about to introduce you to a movie which you might not find easily, but with some hard work and some Googling or VHS, a VHS player, you may be able to see it. It's from 1985 and it's become a really big cult hit in these past years, called The Peanut Butter Solution. Now this is 100% one of the strangest movies I've ever seen. I mean, just talking about it, me and Kevin were laughing and cracking up because of just how weird it is. Here's the best way to describe it. It feels like a dream or a nightmare more than a movie. And when I say that, I'm not saying it's scary, because it's not. I mean, ghosts are involved, but it's not scary. It's, have you ever had a nightmare and you wake up really freaked out and then you're telling someone about your nightmare and you're like, that just kind of sounds really silly or really weird. So it wasn't, in the moment it was scary, but it was just really, really weird. That's what it reminded me of. You're watching, you're just like, oh my God, what is going on here? What is happening in this movie? And it just feels like an experience that you imagined, you made up. You must have made it up. It is definitely original. It is definitely creative and imaginative. Though it's not always incoherent, it is definitely fascinating the entire way through. Let me just break it down for you. There are elements of magic, the supernatural, and the downright strange. I mean, it is just a whimsical and wacky movie that I loved for being so out there. The Peanut Butter Solution is a film you can appreciate for its peculiarity. Even if it isn't the most satisfying movie story-wise, it is just a movie you could watch and just wow, this movie really tried to go out there. And I give it credit where credit's due. This is a Canadian movie, and it's not a movie that I've spoken to a lot of people who've not seen. And here, let me just break this down. This movie, if you don't want to know what it's about and you want to go in blind, fast forward a little bit. This movie is about a young boy who wanders into a house where he is frightened to the point of losing all of his hair. In this house that is haunted are homeless people that he at one point gave money to and helped them out. So when he went into this house, which was burned down, assumingly killing these homeless people, we assume that he had saw a ghost or something of that nature. As this kid has lost all of his hair and he's depressed and he needs to find a way to have his hair and everyone makes fun of him, these homeless ghosts appear and give him the peanut butter solution, which will make his hair grow. However, if he strays from it any way, it can cause chaos. Of course, the young boy strays a little bit, adds a little bit more peanut butter than he should, and his hair continues to grow forever. It doesn't stop. So, I mean, he's in class and the kid behind him, his friend, is cutting it. So, don't wait, it gets weirder. That kid ends up getting kidnapped by his former art teacher, who uses this kid's hair in this underground factory with a bunch of other kidnapped kids to make paintbrushes. They're cutting his hair, putting it on paintbrushes and selling it. And because it's inspired by magic, when you paint with these brushes, it creates magic paintings that you can walk through. So that's what you're missing out on with the peanut butter solution. Kevin, I don't know how you found this movie, but I am glad you did. I'm glad you recommended it. Everyone, go check this out because you're in for a treat. Day 234, 365-day challenge. I continued Kevin week by watching the 1980 film The Watcher in the Woods. And this was an interesting movie that had both good and bad qualities. I don't think there's a bad movie in this week, but I would think this and Keeping Up the Steins weren't good enough to kind of fall on the list of the others. These movies were just okay. They were in the middle. They were mediocre, right? I think this movie has some really good qualities from the acting and the young adult horror and this like suspense feeling. Bette Davis is in this movie and she is phenomenal. And the fact that it's really suspenseful and kind of strange dealing with the supernatural, it's interesting. But it doesn't have the story to back up these fantastic elements, right? You have all this fantasy, but it feels really thin, especially depending which ending you see. There are 3 endings that float around this movie. One would make you feel like you just wasted your money. 2, there's one that kind of explains things, and one that was never fully complete, but would give us a further explanation. I would say you need to watch all 3, well, at least the 2 that make sense, to really kind of get a fulfilling experience or a satisfying ending to watching this movie. It didn't intrigue me as much as the previous movies this week, but Bette Davis makes this movie worth it. Day 235 of the 365-day challenge, I watched the 2001 family film Lloyd. Now, if you've seen Little Giants, you know Lloyd, or Jack, you've seen Lloyd. Lloyd is the young boy. His name's Todd M. Bosley. But he's famously for being in Little Giants. He's got the goggles on. He's very kind of bug-eyed. Then he always kind of played the nerdy kid in these young comedies. Got his own movie. However, it was kind of in development hell for a little bit because it ended up not coming out in 2001. He definitely wasn't 17 when this movie was made. But this is a silly, silly movie. I mean, this is definitely like very simplistic, silly kid movie. They just knew they had this kid who's been seen in a lot of movies. They wanted to give him his own picture, and they just kind of let the writing go around that. They didn't go in with a script, I can tell you that much. It's just absurd. Like the things that are happening in this movie, you're like, wait, what? How is this happening? It's scattered, it's choppy, like it's really poorly edited. It's filled with characters that are goofy and just like don't feel realistic at all. It just feels really incomplete. But it has one saving grace, and that's Todd M. Bosley, the star of the movie. I've always found him to be the funniest character in Little Giants and in Jack. I always found him to be so funny. He's even in an episode of Seinfeld, and he's hilarious in. Just his facial expressions, his mannerisms, and his delivery really makes him funny. So even though you're in this movie that make no sense, like it makes like logical sense, but it's just really like wacky and unrealistic, and you're just like, ugh, what's happening? You have him that's just landing these jokes or these emotions. It doesn't offer like a wonderful performance or a performance that I would go home about, but it's a really believable performance from a kid, an awkward kid playing an awkward kid. I don't think this movie's bad, but again, I don't think it was great. I would recommend The Peanut Butter Solution or Midnight Madness over it, unless you really like that kid like I did. I always thought he was really funny in those kids' films growing up, so I was glad to see him longer on screen than more than 20 minutes. Lloyd is a movie I probably would never sit through again, even though, hear me out here, I thought it was available on Amazon Video to rent, which I was going to do. And I believe it is again, but for whatever reason, when I was watching it on the day I was supposed to watch it, it wasn't available. So I had my girlfriend, the lovely Samantha, Kevin's cousin, run to Zia for me and buy it so I could watch it because I really wanted to see it. So thank you, Samantha. And so even though I might not watch it again, I always can revisit it and revisit Todd Bosley because, hey, why not? Day 236 of the 365-day challenge and week 34, also known as Kevin's Week, I watched the 1985 film The Dirt Bike Kid. And The Dirt Bike Kid is definitely an 80s movie. If you love cheesy family movies from the 80s, this is like prime 80s. It is a film you have to be willing to go with, very much like the Peanut Butter Solution, but not nearly as extreme. And it's about a boy that gets a dirt bike that has a mind of its own, right? Like this dirt bike can turn on, he can drive where he wants to go, even to the point where the bike can fly, and you get to see the boy from, it stars Ralphie from A Christmas Story, and you're on this dirt bike and you're soaring through the city, and they're working together to save a local business and help this young boy become a man. It's a lot of fun, and though like you feel like you've seen this movie with different iterations, like it's always a boy and an imaginary friend, or a kid and an imaginary friend, a kid and this thing. It's always like a different type of changing fantasy. Peach Dragon, for example, the young boy as the dragon it's always this something that this boy can't keep but needs to be in his life at this moment, who becomes his best friend. So it's not necessarily original in that sense, but in the sense that it's like a flying dirt bike, it's pretty original. And I feel like also I would have loved it a lot more had I seen it as a kid, but I still really enjoyed it. It's light, and it's a ridiculous comedy, and if you're really into that 80s style of movie, it's a movie that I would find hard not to like. And one more really out there cheesy 80 movies to wrap up. Kevin's Week, day 237, I watched the 1981 film The Incredible Shrinking Woman. And The Incredible Shrinking Woman is nothing short of a trip. I mean, it is a trip movie. It is so wacky and so odd, and the plot is not very sensible, but it is just a howl of a good time. Kevin really wanted me to watch this one, and The Dirt Bike Kid in particular. And I'm glad I did, because I enjoyed the hell out of both of these movies, excuse my language, but these movies were just so much fun and just so cheesy and campy. I'm a big person who likes like cheesy and campy type movies, and this movie is just a blast. It isn't, okay, so like, obviously this being one of those movies that are critically are slammed because it's cheesy, it doesn't make much sense, there's not a lot of promise here. But I'd consider it a good bad movie. It's one of those bad movies, like a lot from the 80s, that were so bad that it's enjoyably fun and ridiculous enough to laugh at and enjoy now. But even then, I don't think it's as bad as some critics went on and to kind of express, because I think there is some really good in this movie. And it also has this really interesting theme about consumerism and the effects of like chemicals in the household, which is really interesting to think that in 1981 they were still there were people making movies that wanted to address a situation of like, here's how we mindlessly buy things and how we're being advertised to, and advertising and product placement. And then also, like, you guys have to realize, like, chemicals became more. Then chemicals were being brought into the household in more and more products. And, now we have people who are going organic and all these things. Not that that's super new, but it's an interesting to watch a 1980s film that addresses that. But I will say those ideas never fully come to fruition. They're there and you could sense them, but it doesn't have a direct message. You're like, okay, these are bad. But at the end, when you're assuming like, oh, these are bad, they're also what kind of saves our hero. So it's like, oh, I don't know if that's exactly what your message was. Even though we actually, well, maybe it depends on how you view it. But it is a movie that I find, if you like slapstick humor and you like outrageous 80s movies, this is perfect. I mean, watching Lily Tomlin shrink is really fun. And it does get strange, though. Like, the first half of the movie, it's like, okay, this is fun. And then the second half of the movie gets really strange. Like, at one point, there's an ape. Lily Tomlin's, like, riding the ape in the ape's collar, actually, because she's so small, shrinking. It really gets strange. But again, I think it was a lot of fun. And recently, while I was ill, I watched Ant-Man. And watching Ant-Man and how we used CGI and technology to show a person shrinking. And then we watched this movie in 1981 and seeing how they make her shrink, making her wear larger clothes, putting her in bigger set props, making the rooms distorted, meaning you'll have one look of the room that makes things look really small, but it'll expand and look really big for a normal human being. It's really, really clever. They make a giant dollhouse for her to live in. In the movie, it's just a dollhouse, but they made a life-size dollhouse to make you feel like she's fit in a dollhouse. I mean, it's really creative and really fun. Overall, Kevin Week was a blast. I couldn't even pick just one. I would recommend Dirt Bike Kid and Shrinking Women for those who love the 80s and the cheesiness from it. But if you want to go to the extreme, I'd say The Peanut Butter Solution, because that was one movie that I think will stick with me forever. Kevin, thank you so much for giving me these 7 movie recommendations. We might get a Kevin Week Part 2 by the time of the end of the year, but I had a lot of fun doing this. Make sure to click these white eyes. You can see what I've been doing lately. You can see last week's Week 33 update. You can see my tributes to Gene Wilder, as well as some of the reviews and things that we've been working on. Guys, next week I will be back on track, Week 35. Well, now I'm back on track, but next week I won't be late again. Week 35, 365-day challenge will be posted. Make sure to never miss a video by hitting that subscribe button. Also, if you enjoyed it, slap a like on it. Kevin, again, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Keep your movie love alive, because you just showed a bunch of people some great movies to watch. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Jacob Tiranno, and please continue chasing cinema.